It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna time. The first Rico Brogna on a football Sunday. It was the first time you sat down of the year, watched the Mets on a Sunday, and maybe you were distracted by how pathetic the New York Giants were. But the Mets do lose to the Cincinnati Reds. They do win the series. They do complete a homestand that was a pretty big success by going 5-1. But it's funny, Sunday morning, I was having a conversation with my dad, and we were talking about how red hot the Mets are and how well they've been playing and the chances of making the postseason. The normal baseball conversations you've probably had. And I said to him, I know they're going to lose. I know they're going to lose a game. And I can't be mad when they lose a game, but I know there's going to be like a part of me that's disappointed. Even though you can't end the season on literally a 28-game winning streak or whatever it would turn out to be. So I was mentally preparing myself for the fact that they were going to either lose on Sunday or they were going to lose early next week. And as I sat there on a Sunday afternoon trying to, manage all the NFL games and managing the Met game, and as the Mets were deadlocked in a very typical game, a game that seems oddly familiar from this winning streak, get great starting pitching. The offense does very, very little. The bullpen actually looks pretty good for a time. It just had the ending that you kind of dreaded, the ending that we're not used to. And as DJ Stewart struck out to end the game, and yes, we'll spend some time on DJ a little bit later on the decision, the fact that we have to watch him again. But as that game ended, I got to tell you, I was a little bit more pissed off than I realized. I didn't, and I'm not going to just say, well, gee golly, 9-game winning streak. That was fun. You have to lose sometime. Because while that's true, obviously the Mets were not going to run the table to end this regular season. When you lose a game, you look at how you lost the game. And the frustrating things from that game don't just get eliminated because of the fact that they won 9 previous games. Does that make any sense? Does that fit? Like, I get it. They've won 9 in a row. I get it. They are very much in this thing, tied with the Atlanta Braves for the 3rd wild card spot, only trailing San Diego and Arizona by 1 game in the loss column. Yeah, they're right there. It is all right there for them. It is possible the New York Mets are wild card team number 1 when this whole thing is said and done. It's also possible they miss the playoffs. It's right there. It's very tight. Obviously, it's going to come down to the last 3 weeks. And I'm thrilled about that. And I'm thrilled about the fact that they were able to make up this ground. I'm thrilled by the fact that they just pulled off a 5-1 homestand. I said before the homestand, give me 4-2. 5-1 was a damn success. But as you're sitting there, if you went to the ballpark on a Sunday afternoon, or you were watching this game, or listening to this game, or watching the highlights after you watch the Giants embarrass themselves to start a football season, there still are things over the course of a baseball game that frustrate you. May I cite some examples for you? All right, I'm going to do it anyway. The offense was completely lifeless. I mean, Francisco Lindor has cooled off. I don't want to pick on him, but his on-base streak, which has been such a tentpole of this winning streak, it disappeared rather meekly with an 0 for 4. When they did get an opportunity in the 4th inning of this game by Pete Alonso having this really good at-bat and drawing a walk, and or actually Mark Vientos had the really good at-bat and drew the walk, and Pete got hit by a pitch on a 2-2 pitch. They're set up with 2 on and nobody out. They're set up for a big inning. They're set up to take an early lead, and Jesse Winker grounds out, and Jose Iglesias flies out, and Starling Marte grounds out. They get a great opportunity in the 6th inning of this game, and that was the inning where they actually broke through, and they got the clutch hit from Starling Marte. But right after that, with a chance to maybe break the game open, you saw Luis Torrens strike out. You then saw the offense after that against the Cincinnati bullpen go down as meekly as humanly possible. And look, over the course of this winning streak, while they've had their moments offensively, that has not been their strength. They have not hit the cover off the ball during this 9-game winning streak. That wasn't happening. What they were doing, and it sort of continued for this game, is get really good starting pitching and then get a great effort from their bullpen, which they almost got in this game. But the offense struggling the way it did against, let's face it, mediocre pitching. I mean, you're facing a guy and Julian Aguilar, and you're facing Emilio Pagan, and you're facing Justin Wilson and Buck Farmer, who they just bombed a few days earlier, and they could not hit at all. And let's be clear. Let's be very clear before we get into the other aspects of this game, including the decision Mendy made on Saturday that impacted what happened on Sunday. They lost this game because they couldn't hit. I mean, that's it. They lost this game because that offensive performance outside of a 2-out single by Starling Marte in the 6th inning, which was clutch. Outside of that, the offense was dead. It was meek. And it doesn't help when the top of the order does absolutely nothing. When Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo both take 0-4s. Nimmo's gotten close, obviously. Came very close to a game-changing home run in the 3rd inning of this game. He also came close to a home run a day earlier. So he had a few of those over the last couple of days. And I guess that's a positive sign that he's close to breaking out. I guess you could look at it that way. But the one on Sunday was even more frustrating because the one on Saturday, and granted I was at the game, so I had a different vantage point, to me it was clearly a foul ball. It was. He hit a bomb, it went foul. It's bad luck. What can you do? The ball that he hit on Sunday, the finale of this series, I don't think any of us know if it was fair or foul. You even had Mendoza asked after the game, hey, wouldn't it be great if Citi Field had a higher foul poles? I'm going to tell you something that makes no sense. I don't really care. I'm on about 2 hours of sleep. Why? There's no exciting reason on why. Basically, got woke up on Saturday night after sleeping for 30 minutes. And once I got woken up, that was it. I was done. So I'm on no sleep when I say this. So I don't know if it makes any sense, but I think it does. Don't we have the technology? Like, we've sent a freaking man to the moon, right? We have Wi-Fi all over the place. We got, internet wherever you want it. I know those aren't the greatest examples of technology, but think about any other great piece of technology we have. We have a lot of great technology. You're telling me we can't put something in the baseball that tells us if it's fair or foul? I don't know if that makes any sense. But I was thinking about that even when I had a clearer head during the game. I'm like, there's nothing. Maybe it's not even the baseball. Maybe it's, what I always thought it was? All right, this is good. This is psychedelic. Why don't we paint the stands fair territory, foul territory? So besides just a pole down the line, fair territory is painted green, foul territory is painted red. Now, just those seats that are close. You don't have to do the entire ballpark. It doesn't have to turn into Shea Stadium where you had the green and the gray and the blue and the orange and the red, though I do miss that. And if Steve wanted to bring that back to Citi Field, that'd be very, very cool. But if you paint this, I'm telling you, this makes more sense in my head than maybe it sounds. But if you painted the seats the color of fair or foul, then we see the baseball and where it hits, and that's it. And then we know. And don't take this as me complaining. I'm not complaining because I have no idea if that was fair or foul. I really don't. I'm just trying to come up with solutions. But the offense was tough to watch. Now, one of the critiques that a lot of people are going to have, and I have it as well, is why wasn't Edwin Diaz used in this game? It's a great question. It's a great question. So let's examine that. But before we do examine the Edwin Diaz quandary, again, I want to make this very, very clear so we all know. When you score 1 run on 4 hits against, let me read off the names, Julian Aguilar, Tony Santillan, Emilio Pagan, Justin Wilson, Buck Farmer, and Alexis Diaz. When you score 1 run on 4 hits against that load of crap that I just described, we are nitpicking everything else that cost you a game. So I want everyone to know that. It's the offense, stupid. But let us have a conversation about Mendy's handling of the bullpen. First of all, Luis Severino. We'll get to the Diaz part, but let's start with the whole thing, because the only way to fairly examine the Edwin Diaz decision is to look at how he got there and even a few things from Saturday. So Severino was great in this game, and Severino was allowed to try to get Novel Marte out with a runner on second and 2 outs, nursing a 1-0 lead. His pitch count at the time was in the high 90s. I, for one, I raised my hand, had 0 issues with Luis Severino being allowed the opportunity to get the third out of the seventh inning. Why, you ask? He'd earned it. He had pitched very well throughout this game. I thought what he did in the fifth inning when he got out of a first and third nobody out jam was incredibly impressive. He picks a runner off, number one, and then gets the back-to-back strikeouts against Marte and against Benson. And that's when Severino was very pumped up after he got that final out. He had done that throughout the game, even in the sixth inning, runner on second after he makes the miss throw, when he actually threw over for a third time, which is unique, threw it past Pete Alonso, he was able to get the big out on Spencer Steer. So Sevy was getting the big outs. He had pitched very well throughout this game. I'm not deeply concerned about a pitch count that's 97, 98. And remember, that base runner that was on second base got there because of an infield hit. It's not like he was being smoked. So, number one, no issue with Severino being allowed to face Marte with a runner on second and two out. And it was the luckiest hit in the world. I mean, when you look at the 5 hits that Severino gave up, I would say 4 of them were of the cheap, bleeding, blooper, BS category. Again, not an excuse, just describing how dominant Luis Severino was. He was that good. So no issue with him being allowed to finish the 7th inning. Unfortunately, couldn't do it. He gives up the blue pit. At that point, go to the bullpen, which he does with Reed Garrett, who continues to look incredible. Reed Garrett has firmly entered himself in the circle of trust. I think he showed that in this game by getting the last out of the 7th and then having not just a 1-2-3 inning, but a dominant 1-2-3 inning. And then you get to the 9th inning. So here's my question, my dilemma with Mendy's decision. Edwin Diaz had pitched 2 days in a row. He pitched on Friday. Of course he did. It was a tie game. Tie game at home, Edwin Diaz is going to pitch. He pitches on Saturday with a 4-run lead. I don't have an issue. I talked about this on the previous Rico. I'll bring it up again. I don't have an issue with going to my closer with a 4-run lead. Why, do you ask? Because you've been warming the guy up anyway, because it's a relatively close game. And in the 9th inning, if whoever you go to that's not Diaz puts a guy on base, dare I say 2 guys on base, are you not going to want to go to Edwin Diaz? Are you going to futz around with whatever pitcher has come into this game not named Edwin Diaz? No. I think like most of us, especially with the way Edwin's been throwing the baseball since the grand slam against Arizona, you would say, hey, I got to go to Edwin Diaz. So with a 4-run lead, I'm not as opposed to not going to him. And keep this in mind if you are, okay? Why are you opposed to it? Because there's a stat called save, and a save is one when it's a 3-run game, but it's not one when it's a 4-run game. Are you literally making your decision based on a stat that really nobody gives a rat's ass about? It's a stat that's not important. Maybe it was 15 years ago, but it's really not. And we've talked about it. Use your best reliever in the 7th or 8th inning. He may not even get a save. So you're against it because it's a stat. Or are you against it because a 4-run lead? Oh, that's no problem. But a 3-run lead, oh, geez, my nipples are nervous. I gotta go to my top reliever. Like when you think about it that way, it doesn't make sense if you're opposed to it. So I was not opposed to going to Edwin Diaz on Saturday. Was I a little biased in that? I took my youngest son to the game, my young man, Spence, who's only 3, and he got through the entire game. And I thought the light show, the excitement of the Edwin Diaz trumpets would push him over the top to get through the 9th inning. Maybe a little bit. I benefited selfishly from Edwin Diaz coming into that game. I kid, though. Like, sure, that's true. But I mean everything I just said. Why opposed to it with a 4-run lead, but for it with a 3-run lead? Here's where I question Mendy, though. So again, not against going to Edwin Diaz on Saturday. Why screw around? Go win your 9th game in a row. The heart of the order was coming up. You want to go to somebody else and have 2 guys get on, and then you got to get Diaz warmed up anyway? Like, think about that aspect of it. If you have a 4-run lead, you probably are going to want your closer warming before anything happens, just in case you feel the need to pull that lever of emergency to go to your best reliever. So if you feel that way and you're warming up him anyway, why F around? Just go to him. Here's my issue with Mendy, or my question for Mendy. We have already seen Edwin Diaz pitch 3 games in a row. We've seen that. And by the way, we saw him do it, and we saw him do it getting out of his slump. He gives up the home run to Corbin Carroll. That was the shocking beginning of the winning streak the following day. He pitches the next day. He pitches the day after that, or 2 days after that. So that was when we saw Edwin pitch 3 days in a row. And I think if you total it up, it was 4 to 5 days. So Edwin Diaz on Sunday would have pitched his 3rd straight day and 4 out of 5. Now, I'll admit, if you go to Edwin Diaz on Sunday, you're probably asking too much for him to be available Monday in Toronto. Well, guess what? No one's talking about Monday in Toronto. I'm not worried about Monday in Toronto. We'll get to Monday in Toronto when, dare I say, it's Monday in Toronto. Here's the other thing. When Edwin Diaz pitched those 3 games in a row, he did it by actually throwing more pitches than he had thrown the last couple of days. I'll pull up the numbers just to back that up. Like, his pitch count over the last couple of days when he has pitched has not been very high. When he came into the game on Saturday, he threw 16 pitches. When he came into the game on Friday, he threw 14 pitches. When he had pitched 2 days earlier in a 5-run game, so not a 4-run game, but he was also warming up. The Mets had broken the game open. He threw 16 pitches. He has not thrown a lot of pitches during this heavy workload period where he would have been asked to pitch 3 days in a row coming into a game that was tied in the 9th inning. If you want to compare that to the Arizona stuff, well, listen to this. When Edwin Diaz blew the game and gave up the grand slam to Corbin Carroll, he threw 21 pitches. That's bigger than any game I mentioned. The following day, he threw 18 pitches, also a larger number than the pitch counts I've just talked about. And then when he pitched the 3rd day in a row, pretty economical. He pitched a dominant 10-pitch 1-2-3 inning. So you weren't asking him to do much more than what you had previously asked him to do about a week and a half ago. And I'm not overly concerned about his workload for 2 reasons. Edwin Diaz has pitched better when been given a heavy workload. That's been proven throughout his Met career. And number 2, because of the IL stint, because of the suspension, it's not as if he's overtaxed this season. So my critique of Carlos Mendoza may be a little bit different than others who are mad about him pitching on Saturday. I'm not against him pitching on Saturday. I'm against him not being used on Sunday. But if you're Phil Maton, you come into a game, tie game, 9th inning, heart of the batting order. Maton had entered the circle of trust. That's the other problem with this. Edwin Diaz is the Mets' best reliever. I think we all believe in him more than anybody else in this bullpen, despite those 2 blown saves, really the 1 blown save and then the loss in San Diego prior to that. But you've got a bullpen that's pitched well. I mean, during this winning streak, this bullpen has been unbelievable. So Phil Maton came into this game with a track record recently of pitching really well. And unfortunately, if you look at what happened and how this inning kind of got away from him, some of it was bad luck and some of it was just that one pitch. Like he hit Spencer Steer. Kind of bad luck, also one bad pitch, allowing the leadoff man to get on. Ty France hits that ground ball down the 3rd base line. Vientos actually made a great play. Vientos saved it from being 2nd and 3rd, nobody out. Makes a diving play. It's an infield hit. He gets the ground out, and then he gets ahead of Santiago Espinal. And he just hung a sweeper or a slider. I forget which one it was. 1-2 ahead of the count. And you could almost feel as that ball was leaving his hand, it was about to be ripped. So Maton failed. Now, he hasn't failed a lot as a New York Met, and I would rather have seen Edwin Diaz in that game, especially against the heart of the Cincinnati order. But it's not like Carlos Mendoza went to, some bum. He didn't go to Mel Rojas from 25 years ago. He went to a relief pitcher who so far as a New York Met has been very good. Unfortunately, in this case, he failed. That's the problem. He failed. He made a couple of bad pitches, a couple of mistakes, and a 1-1 game turned into a 3-1 game. But it goes back to the beginning. You can't only score one run against Julian Aguilar and the Cincinnati bullpen. That can't happen. You do that, you lose. But for Diaz moving forward, I want to see Mendy continue to be aggressive in using him, because that can be the benefit from the fact that Edwin Diaz has had a very light workload this season. He is coming off a year in which he didn't pitch. I get that. But just to put in perspective how little Edwin Diaz has pitched, he's thrown 43 innings this season. 2 years ago, he threw 62 innings. That's a 19-inning difference, and we're obviously just a couple of weeks left in the season. Year before that, he threw 62 innings. This actually has a chance, we'll see where this ends up, to being one of Edwin Diaz's lowest inning totals in a full major league season. Obviously, you got to take out 2020. And I look at that as a benefit. I look at that as actually a good thing. The suspension, the injury. Also, there were just times in which they just didn't use him because the Mets didn't have save situations, because those opportunities just didn't come around. So I want to see Mendy continue, and I do say continue because he did pitch him 3 days in a row a week and a half ago, but continue, and more so being aggressive using Edwin Diaz, his best relief pitcher, despite how well the rest of the bullpen has pitched. As far as Saturday's game was concerned, very encouraging to see Jose Quintana do what he did, pitch into the 7th inning, give up the 5 hits, scatter the 5 hits, make the big pitch when he needed to, backed up by great defense by his middle infield. Jose Quintana has had a very up and down season. My hope, our hope, is as up and down as it's been. You've got, 4 or 5 starts left? I guess if you do the math, maybe 4 starts left. I'll have to count that up. Can you give us the best of you over these next 3 weeks? And he delivered that on Saturday. But again, the Met offense did nothing. Think about it. Met offense getting shut down by Jacob Junis. They're getting no hit into the 5th inning. At that point, I started announcing to my section, Junis is pitching a no-hitter. Junis is pitching a no-hitter. Hey, the Reds have a no-hitter. I don't believe in jinxes, but I figured, why the hell not? And then Jose Iglesias, of all people, ripped one into the right field corner for a double. And they finally broke through offensively. Harrison Bader, be very good to get him going last couple of weeks of the season. Goes right center for a home run. Pete Alonso comes through with a big RBI single. How about that? Pete has not a lot of big hits. That was a big hit. J.D. Martinez comes through with a 2-run double. And luckily, instead of trying to hold on and win a 1-0 nail-biter or a 2-0 nail-biter, we were able to see the Met offense break through, but only for 1 inning. And that has been a story throughout this winning streak. They don't score a lot of runs, and when they do, it usually comes in 1 inning. Can't complain about it because they're winning every night, but assuming this starting pitching is not going to keep up this torrid pace, assuming this bullpen isn't going to remain perfect, it wasn't in Game 3 of this series, now it's time for the offense to step up. Now it's time for this team to give you a couple of games where they pound out 7 or 8 runs, and they do it on a consistent basis. Why not this week against Toronto? Kevin Gausman hasn't had a great year. Chris Bassett hasn't had a great year. Let's see the Met offense click up north against Toronto. But the other story from Saturday was realizing that Jeff McNeil's not going to play again for the Mets this season. I guess there's a chance Jeff McNeil could play again for the Mets if this team goes on some kind of long postseason run. I'm not even going to think about that. The reality is Jeff McNeil get hit by a pitch. And it's crazy, man. Like, we do the Rico on Friday, and I mention it. Yeah, McNeil got hit by a pitch. They'll do testing tomorrow. Never for a didn't think that for a second. Like, were you guys thinking that? First of all, Jeff's laughing after he got hit by the pitch. Staying in the game doesn't mean all that much because we've seen this a lot. Guys will stay in the game, and then we'll find out, he tore his Achilles. Now, usually not that bad, but, guy gets hit by a pitch, stays in the game, and then an inning or two later, they eventually come out. So it wasn't necessarily him staying in the game. It was more the way it looked when he got hit. He has all that body armor on. The fact that he's laughing, I didn't go to bed that night or record the Rico thinking, boy, Jeff McNeil may be out for the season. So that really took me by surprise when I saw that on Saturday. And besides feeling bad for the guy, he's a competitor. He's had a very good second half offensively. He's really fixed his season, even though Baseball Reference will always define Jeff McNeil's 2024 by sucking. In the moment, it's easy for us to say, Jeff was really hitting in the second half of the season. But most of the time, we don't think that way. We're going to see 238, which is the lowest batting average of his major league career. We're going to see 692 OPS, the second lowest OPS of his career. That's what we're going to see. Now, reality is he was hitting a lot better in the second half of the year and being a positive for this team. So I feel bad for Jeff. The Mets lose depth by obviously not having Jeff McNeil. But Jose Iglesias has made things very difficult over the last few months in a good way. He's so good defensively at second base. I don't know if he can keep this up offensively, even though he'll mix in some big hits here and there like he did Saturday, the double to break up the no-hitter, a base hit later in the game, another 2-hit performance. He did have one base hit in this game, the finale of this series, and it was actually a pretty important base hit. It was an infield hit right before Marte got the RBI single that gave him the lead. So I don't know if he's going to keep this up offensively. I don't think any of us do. But boy, he is something else defensively. He is a joy to watch defensively. That's like something Bob Murphy would say. He's such a joy to watch defensively. Oh, Gary Cohen. But he really is. He's a excellent defensive second baseman. That double play that he turned on Saturday, where he makes the diving stop, somehow gets up, makes the throw to Lindor at second base, who was in the second inning, had a chance to really turn into a big inning against Jose Quintana because Quintana walked Spencer Steer to start it. That double play was huge. I think it really changed the game in a lot of ways because Quintana was shaky, gave up 2 hits right after that. Now, you can't assume the same things happen if Iglesias doesn't turn the double play, if it's just a base hit to right field the way it looked. But that was an incredible defensive play. And even when Lindor made his great double play turn an inning later, and it was absolutely set up by Lindor, Iglesias is so quick with his hands, man. He turns that double play faster than anybody. And I like Jeff McNeil defensively. I don't think he actually gets enough credit for as solid as he is defensively. He's not Jose Iglesias. And Mendy wasn't playing Iglesias every day. He wasn't doing it. Now he has to.
Can I just jump in here? Because I know that we're praising Jose Iglesias' defensive prowess, and he is amazing at second base. But I think we got to give him a little more kudos for his offense, too. And it's not like a fluke that he maybe the timeliness is pretty amazing. I think going in on to Friday or Saturday's game, he was 10 for 20 with 2 outs, runners in scoring position. Yeah. I mean, that's impressive. But look at his batting average. I know we don't look at batting average, but if you look at his batting average, he's always like his career 286 hitter. Like he just hits in a good spot. He doesn't hit for power, but he hits a good timely spots.
He's been great offensively. All I'm saying is defense is consistent. And so I'm confident final few weeks of the season, he'll continue to be great defensively. I don't know if he's going to keep it up offensively. He's had a great offensive year. You're right. He's been insanely clutch. I'm just more confident that his defense will continue to be that. And look, he should have been the everyday second baseman for 2 months now. But to get Jeff McNeil's bat in the lineup and with the depth of this team, that's why there were days where we wouldn't see Iglesias out there. Now, I don't want to diminish losing McNeil because here's why losing McNeil is a big deal. Why we can't just say, well, Iglesias is playing every day. No problem. It hurts the bench. It hurts the depth of this team. We'll get into the decision to call up DJ Stewart, and if it shouldn't have been him and it should have been somebody else, we'll get to that in a few minutes. But look at the end of Game 3. You're looking at your bench late in the game with Terens and Bader coming up down by 2 runs. You could have had Jeff McNeil on a day where he wasn't playing, but you didn't. So I think from a starting lineup perspective, it's easy to say, it's no big deal. Iglesias plays every day. You've got a lot of outfielders. What's the problem? It's just the depth. And the depth takes a hit. I think that Sunday's game was a great example of that because you look to your bench, you look to your left-handed bat off the bench, and you find DJ Stewart. So it's not a good thing. It's not the end of the world. It's not losing Lindor, obviously, but it sucks. Forgetting the personal level of losing Jeff McNeil. And I'll tell you this, you can write this one down, and I don't think I'm alone in saying this. Not that I want to think too much about it. I think he is never playing another game for the Mets again. I do. I think that this offseason, which may feature a lot of changes, may feature God knows what, I think it will feature Jeff McNeil not being on this team for a myriad of reasons. Despite his great versatility, when you look at the future, when you look at Acuna, when you look at Jet Williams, when you even look at Iglesias, who's a free agent at the end of the year, how could you not bring him back? Especially if the Mets are successful in signing, let's just say, a really, really expensive, awesome offensive player. You may look to go a little cheaper at other positions. So if I had to predict right now on September 8th as we record this, I don't think Jeff McNeil plays another game again for the New York Mets. I hope I'm wrong, because hopefully he plays in the NLCS. Hopefully the Mets go on a deep run and he can come back. Now, let's get to the decision, because the decision is causing a lot of anger. And, of course, I'm talking about the decision to call up DJ Stewart to replace him on the roster spot. Before I give you my opinion, let's read some emails. Let's see some DJ Stewart complaining. So we'll listen or read some of the voices of Met fans upset about DJ, and I'll tell you my thoughts on this. Samuel writes, as a Met fan, I can't complain. It's been an unbelievable week plus. Can't win every game. But I got to ask, what's the obsession with DJ Stewart? Why does he get the call up for Jeff McNeil? DJ Stewart, frankly, is not a good baseball player. His batting average this year is 175. His OPS is 625. He can't run. Maybe he walks once in a while, but who cares? If Acuna is not ready, find someone else down there who is. Why not try Luke Ritter? And perhaps worst of all, DJ reminds us of a baseball player we all want to forget. I think his name starts with a V, but I won't say it. So please, Mets, find someone else for the roster. Sam. Yes, it's very, very much annoying. Yes, it is. Now, when Jeff McNeil got hurt, there were a lot of suggestions on who they should call up. Jimmy writes, what message would Stearns be sending to both the team and the fan base if he recalled Jimmy Stewart? DJ Stewart. The team already has a plethora of outfield options, all of which are hitting above 200. He can't steal bases. He can't lay down a bunt. He can walk, but aren't we familiar with another DH with a similar build to Stewart who did nothing other than walk? If you want an outfielder, Gilbert's been hitting, bring him up. If you want a more McNeil-like option, someone who can play second outfield and swipe a base in a pinch, call up Acuna. The team cannot inject the 175 hitting Stewart into this final push. So my first reaction to Jeff McNeil going down was Luis Angel Acuna. That was my initial response. The idea that he can play the infield, the idea that he can play the outfield, but more importantly, the fact that he has speed. Because the question I asked when the Mets eventually added Reyes to this roster was, what are you going to do with that extra guy? What roles are you going to have? Is he going to play? Is he going to start? Is he going to be a pinch hitter? Is he going to be a pinch runner? What is he going to be? And the more you thought about it, the answer was he's literally only going to be a pinch runner. That's it. That's what that job's going to be, which is why calling up a guy like Reyes, when you think about it, makes a lot of sense. Pablo Reyes isn't starting a game. He may never get an at-bat. He's literally going to be used as a pinch runner, tie game for J.D. Martinez in the ninth inning, or the extra inning rule down the stretch of the season. But now you have to ask yourself a new question. Jeff McNeil is out. What's the role of the guy replacing him? So I think about it this way. Jose Iglesias is the everyday second baseman, no questions asked. I don't even think there's a debate. I'm not calling Luis Angel Acuna up to be the second baseman. I'm not. Sorry. I'm not calling Luke Ritter up to be the second baseman. I'm not. Brett Beatty obviously got injured. He's not an option. If Beatty was still hitting, we'd have a very different discussion. But he's not, because he's hurt. So, goodbye. You have an outfield that features Starling Marte, who should play as often as he can. Brandon Nimmo, who despite his frustrating slumps, should also play as often as he can. It features JD Martinez at DH. It features Jesse Winker, who I think we'd all agree now should play against right-handed pitching. And then you've got two good defensive players, really good defense players, in Tyrone Taylor and Harrison Bader. And you almost kind of want to play the hot hand. Bader had cooled off. Now it looks like maybe he's warming up with the home run on Saturday. So if you call someone up, is that guy playing over that group? And my answer is no. That's my answer. My answer is no. If there is a right-hander on the mound, Jesse Winker is going to play left field or right field. Now, I want Marte playing every day. Obviously, they're taking it careful with him. At this point, let's say it's the Braves series and you're facing righties, or even, this series coming up because there's only 3 weeks left in the year. If you're comfortable playing Starling at Marte every day, I think your best offensive team is Winker in left, Nimmo in center, Marte in right, JD's the DH, Iglesias at second base. If there's a lefty on the mound, a little bit different. You're not going to play Winker. You're going to have Marte in left. You're going to have Nimmo in left. Marte in right, Nimmo in left, and either Tyrone Taylor or Harrison Bader in center. I don't see with any of the options, and that includes guys like Drew Gilbert, no offense to him, I don't see any of the guys they're calling up having a pathway to being in the starting lineup, at least for me. Carlos Mendoza may do something different. I'm giving you my opinion. I wouldn't play any of those guys as a starter. So now I start to think, well, I've got to evaluate that spot as a bench spot. Well, how am I going to use that bench spot? And I think you saw the answer on Sunday. The answer is as a pinch hitter, an occasional pinch hitter. But with Taylor being a righty, with Bader being a righty, and those are the kind of flux guys, it's probably a left-handed bat. So to me, just in a perfect world, a left-handed bat who I'm only going to use probably off the bench for some pop. I'm probably not going to use them that much as a pinch runner because I've got Reyes for that. Now, if he has speed, great. Not the end-all, be-all. I want a lefty with a little bit of pop. Trust me, I'm not doing this to defend DJ Stewart because DJ Stewart doesn't even have that said pop. Like, yes, he can technically hit home runs, but he's had a crappy year. But I'm trying to explain maybe where they're going with this. Do we not agree, though, because this is the way I'm laying it out and my thought is, a left-handed bat would be a preference. And position-wise, do you need him to play the middle infield? It'd be nice, but it's not essential because Reyes is now your super utility guy, and hopefully he never plays. Vientos, Lindor, Iglesias, and Alonso should play, barring injury, every inning for the rest of the season in the infield. So, yes, it helps with your versatility to have a guy who can play the infield, but it's not essential because Reyes is on this roster. Now, I've described the player that they could use. DJ Stewart ain't it because he hasn't performed. I'm with everybody on that. Guy's hitting 175. Don't tell me that he draws walks occasionally. He has had so many opportunities. He ain't it. But I would prefer a left-handed bat with a little bit of pop. They don't have that as an option right now other than DJ Stewart. They used to have that option, and this is where the Mets effed up. They had that option. That option's name was Ben Gamel. Ben Gamel hit a little bit while he was here. Ben Gamel can play a little defense. And oh, by the way, when the Mets DFA'd Ben Gamel, he got picked up by the Astros, and he's hitting there. So the mistake that they made off was that they shouldn't have DFA'd Gamel. They should have DFA'd DJ Stewart.
No, I get that, but here's the thing is we have to, and I understand that this may not be a move for the playoffs. It's a move for the last 3 weeks of the season. Somebody is probably going to get released, waived on their team, and the Mets have to claim them because DJ Stewart is not the answer. DJ Stewart is reminiscent of Daniel Vogelback, just a little bit lighter. No offense, he does nothing. He does absolutely nothing to this team. You need to have, if you're going to get a left-handed batter, get someone that actually hits. He doesn't do it. He doesn't. It's frustrating, man.
Yeah, I think, and that's why ultimately, even though they don't have that left-handed option, unless they held on to Ben Gamel, which they didn't, it's too little too late. And unless someone else pops in, I think the guy I would call up is Luke Ritter. Because the thing about Luke Ritter is that while he's a righty, okay, so he's not a left-handed hitter, he's had such a good year offensively at AAA. He's had 26 home runs. He's driven in a bunch of runs. And I think maybe you catch lightning in a bottle. Maybe this guy coming up and being that bat off the bench. And sometimes I even say this, don't overthink lefty-righty. So I'm trying to answer the question by describing, yes, I'd prefer a lefty, but sometimes you can't overthink it. You just have to put the best possible option up there. And so he's not on the 40-man. That's not that complicated. I mean, you can easily add him to the 40-man. First of all, you can put Jeff McNeil on the 60-day IL, considering he's out for the season, or you could DFA DJ Stewart. So there are ways to get Ritter onto the 40-man, and he does play everywhere, which is a nice side benefit. He's played first, he's played second, he's played third, he's played the outfield. I think we've seen enough of DJ Stewart failing up here that we need to give someone else an opportunity. The other thing that I heard that kind of bothered me, even though I wouldn't say he's the guy to call up about Luis Angel Acuna, was Mendy saying, quote, he needs to play every day. So here's why I now have an issue with that. He's played every day all season long. There are 2 weeks left in the season, in the minor league season. That's it, 2 weeks. I want you to ask yourself a question. Do you think Luis Angel Acuna would be better ready to help the Mets next year by getting 2 more weeks in a place he's been all year long, or sitting on the bench, listening and learning from the guys on this roster in the middle of a pennant race? And even being thrown into the middle of a pennant race, even being thrown into a big opportunity where he gets into a game. So if you don't want to call up Luis Angel Acuna because you just don't think he's the best option, right? You like the idea of Luke Ritter's pop, or even the crazy idea that DJ Stewart's going to figure it out. That's totally fine. Luis Angel Acuna has not had like this incredible season where he needs to be called up. But don't give me this he needs to play every day crap. That's an argument for June. If it's the middle of the summer and we're pining for a prospect to be called up, I'm totally with you. Guy's got to play every day. Don't waste him or rot him on the bench at the major league level. This is not wasting or rotting a guy on the bench. This is learning. This is watching and seeing and growing, and dare I say, being thrown into it. I don't like that reasoning for why Luis Angel Acuna is not here. Drew Gilbert's interesting. He hasn't played a lot because of the injury, but he is a left-handed bat. He does have a little bit of pop. He does have a little bit of speed. The question you got to ask yourself is he best equipped to handle major league pitching? Do you think he is? I think Luke Ritter's honestly the answer. I don't think it's that complicated. I think what the Mets have to remember, what David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza have to remember, is something that Pete said all the way back in April. One of your first impressions turned out to be really accurate about this administration is that they hold people accountable. Right?
I did say that.
Hold DJ Stewart accountable. He hasn't been good. He doesn't deserve another opportunity to be up here striking out to end the game.
Here's another crazy idea. If that's the route they don't want to take because they want him to play every day, whatever, I think it's BS. I think at this point in time, sit on the bench, like you said, you can learn a lot from JD Martinez. Let's be serious here. But did you see what the Braves did yesterday?
In terms of what?
A trade they made.
I missed that. What trade did they make?
They traded for Kevin Biggio. Now, I'm not saying Kevin Biggio is anything to write home about, but they're desperate for players, so they made a trade for a player. Now, he can't be added to the playoff roster. That's the bugaboo. But don't you want to get to the playoffs?
You can do that. I mean, there have been, it's so funny thinking about those. I remember Frank Tanana. I think the Mets traded Frank Tanana to the Yankees in September, so he wasn't going to be eligible to be on the postseason roster. And I'm glad you brought that up because obviously, yes, if the Mets brought someone in from another organization, whether it's via trade, and obviously it would have to be minor league because you can't trade for anybody. Like you can claim a guy on waivers, you can sign a guy after they're released. The only kind of trades that are allowed are guys that are in the minor leagues. That's the only sort of trades that can be made since we obviously had a trade deadline. but they can't be on the postseason roster. Anybody that's in your organization prior to September 1st can be on a postseason roster. And I bring that up because Joe Giovanello asked that question. Evan and Hall, first-time emailer, long-time listener, back to the Joe and Evan days. I was wondering with McNeil's injury and the likelihood that the Mets call up DJ Stewart to replace him, do you think it's still possible for Luis Angel Acuna to get called up once the AAA season is over? And if so, would he be eligible for the postseason should the Mets make it, given he wasn't on the Major League roster by September 1st? Holding out hope that we won't need to see DJ for too long. So, yeah, keep that in mind. Anybody in the organization would be eligible to come up. So, from that standpoint, if Angel Acuna gets the call after the minor league season's over, even if it's in the last few days of the season, he could be up here. I don't think he's the best answer, in my opinion, but right now it feels like any answer would be better than DJ Stewart, that's for sure. Brian Smith had a great question, especially related to Friday's game. We have officially gotten to the point where Ron Darling and Gary Cohen have become openly critical of teams pitching to Mark Vientos with an open base and Pete Alonso on deck. I realize this podcast is one shameless Pete Alonso echo chamber. That's not fair, but a good argument against moving Vientos to first base next year and letting Alonso walk no longer exists. It's time to allocate Pete's money and all the cash coming off the books from Max, JV, McCann, Narvaez, Pete DeSoto, and 1 to 2 frontline starting pitchers. Vientos will cost $1 million while Alonso is still seeking judge money, per a Sportico article published last week. Clearly, he won't get that, but $20 to $25 million for one of the worst clutch hitters who also leads the league in base runners stranded in 24, whose slugging and home runs have plummeted, is not a good investment. Enjoy the last month plus of Pete Boys because it's Vientos time now, and that's what's best for the New York Mets. I take issue with we're a Pete Alonso echo chamber. I'd like for Pete Alonso to come back, but I think there are certainly things in this offseason that can lead to him not coming back. Juan Soto, of course, has to be a priority during the offseason. Vientos has the ability to shift over to first base. But in a perfect world, they won't have to do that. Because if you're shifting Vientos over to first base, great, problem solved. Who's your freaking third baseman? But that's for next year. And calling Pete the worst clutch hitter in baseball, he's not had a clutch season. I'd agree with that, despite the big RBI single that he had on Saturday. Despite the fact that you brought up, yeah, you go back to Friday and it's amazing. I didn't even think about it at the time, but now with retrospect, you got a base open. Vientos had already hit a home run earlier in the game. You should walk him with Pete on deck, which sounds nuts, but it probably does make sense. But Pete having a down year from a clutch standpoint in a year in which he still has hit 31 home runs so far, close to 80 RBIs, shouldn't be the end all. That's it, boys. He can't come back. We'll see how the offseason unfolds. We'll also see what happens over the next 3 weeks. I ask you this, Brian. What if the Mets pick up where they left off after this 9-game winning streak ended? What if they go out and win 7 more in a row? What if they sweep Atlanta in 2 weeks? What if they win the World Series and Pete Alonso is the World Series MVP? You going to be saying the same thing? Now, I know all that stuff is very unlikely, but one can dream, right? Look, this whole season's been one big dream because when they were sitting there after Memorial Day, I think we were all looking at ourselves saying, oh, my God, these Ricos in August are going to be brutal. Oh, my God. What are we going to talk? We're going to be talking about Juan Soto from June 10th on. And somehow they've given us a season. But now they got to finish the job. 3 games coming up in Toronto against a Blue Jay team that has lost 7 out of their last 10 and has had a very disappointing season. And when you look at their lineup, it's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and not much else. They will face Chris Bassett, old friend Chris Bassett, on Friday, who dominated them when they saw him last year. They'll face Bowden Francis on Tuesday, and Kevin Gausman is going to start the finale of this series on a late Wednesday afternoon. Paul Blackburn is coming back, thankfully. Tyler McGill, for now, is in the bullpen. They do have to make a roster move to get Blackburn on the roster. Alex Young continues to pitch well. It seems like weird to send him down. I like McGill being in the bullpen because I would want a long man. So it does create the question of who would be the odd man out. Does Huascar Brazoban go back to the minor leagues? We'll see how they handle that. But Blackburn's coming back Monday. David Peterson tries to continue his brilliant season on Tuesday, and then Sean Manaea on Wednesday. So they've got 3 in Toronto, and then they've got 3 in Philadelphia. They have an off day on Thursday. They then will embark, beginning with those 3 in Philly, 7 of 10 against the Philadelphia Phillies, which we had talked about a while ago, how, wow, they've got all those games up against the Philadelphia Phillies. And it's even inspired a few to dream about catching Philadelphia. And look, that is a very unrealistic goal. I mean, you can say it, like, why not have the goal as a fan? But the idea that the Mets are going to make up all that ground on the Phillies is crazy. Mike Caputo started dreaming about it, saying 7 with 17 to go payback. It's been a great run. I hope they continue to win more series and finish in the playoffs. The pitching has been above expectations, and the lineup has been getting clutch home runs, a great combination. I'll be realistic like you, but if you want to dream, it is kind of funny that when we could be about 7 back with about 16 or 17 to go when we go to Philadelphia this weekend, with 7 games to play against them. Unfortunately, we all witnessed 2007 when we had the 7-game lead entering a weekend series and Philly came into Shea and swept us. It's not likely for us to reverse that 17 years later, but that would be nice to put a little scare into the Phillies starting this Friday. Of course, it'd be nice. It'd be nice because if they put a scare into the Phillies, they're likely to make the playoffs. If they win enough of those games, they could just make the playoffs. It's very different than 2007 because in 2007, the way the wild card race worked out, obviously back then there was only one wild card team. There was no safety net. You know, now there's a safety net where if the Mets somehow did catch Philadelphia and they are 7 games back with, I guess technically it's 7 back with 19 to go. And back then it was 7 with 17 to go. So yeah, we're pretty much at that same number. If the Mets were to pull that off, the Phillies are very likely to make the playoffs anyway. So they do have that safety net. Now, it would be a disaster in Philadelphia. I mean, to blow a lead like that would be crazy. But I do think it's unrealistic. This team just won 9 in a row. And how much ground did they actually gain on Philadelphia? 2 games? Phillies were playing well for a while till they lost these back-to-back games. But yes, they have a lot of games against them. The problem I had was you're not winning all 7 against them. Like winning 5 out of 7, sure. That's puncturing 3 games into that lead. So I always thought going into that series, the run of games they're about to play, they needed to be 4 or 5 games out. Now, they can still do that. They can go sweep the Toronto Blue Jays, and maybe the Philadelphia Phillies get tripped up. They're about to play 3 games against Tampa Bay. So, yeah, if they gain 2 more games in the standings and they're 5 out going into that series, then I would say, wow, okay. But right now, not even thinking about that. It'd be great to have happen. I'm thinking about somehow getting one of these wild card spots. And luckily, they've gained a lot of ground on San Diego and Arizona, where the Diamondbacks and Padres are also right there in this National League wild card race. So it'll be a fun 3 days. My goal, very similar to the goal I laid out coming into this homestand, win the series in Toronto, win the series in Philadelphia, 4-2 before they come back home. And they'll take on the Washington Nationals. Schedule continues to be trickier than everybody else. So hopefully they can pick this up. The scary thing when you have a big winning streak is that how do you respond when it ends? You know, I think back to 2018, Mickey Callaway's first year when they had the 9-game winning streak and they started 11-1 and they played like crap after that. So very important after you have a long winning streak to then respond. It ended. Now respond. 3 games against a mediocre Blue Jay team. Go respond. We appreciate you listening and downloading. You can always contact the Rico at the RicoB@gmail.com, RicoB@gmail.com. We'll try to pump out as many Ricos as we can down the stretch of this season. That's what Hoff and I are trying to do. So can't guarantee we're going to give you a Rico after every game, but we're certainly going to try during the heat of this year. I can guarantee we're not doing a Rico after game 1 of the series against the Blue Jays because that's also a Jet night. That's Aaron Rodgers hopefully playing a full game for the New York Jets night. But as far as Tuesday, we'll see. Definitely Wednesday because I'll be recapping a series, and we'll certainly give you an off-day Rico on Thursday as well. So a lot of Ricos as we enter the final stretch of this 2024 Major League Baseball season. Thank you again very much for downloading, subscribing, and listening to another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.